and how they're kind of interrelated. So that oxygen, that's diatomic oxygen. That's the way we breathe it in. Well, I'm here to tell you that the mitochondria will split that diatomic oxygen and will make a water molecule from it. So this is what's going on in the mitochondria, in the cell. You're getting one glucose molecule, C6H12O6, in the presence of 6 moles of oxygen. And you're going to burn it completely. Anybody know what reaction that is? What type of reaction would we call it?
Radioactive.
No. Plus heat. Combustion reaction. It's carbons in the presence of oxygen. I'm making pure carbon dioxide and water. Isn't that what our cars do? It's combustion reaction, right? We're just burning. We're burning carbon. We're burning carbons. That's what we do. We burn carbons, guys. Really, what we're doing? We're not burning the carbons. We're stealing electrons from the carbons. Did everybody hear me? We're stealing electrons from carbons. Now, I'm going to give you a little thought. I grew up in Philadelphia, and in the summers I would go visit my uncle who lived in New York. And my uncle lived not far from Central Park, right? So I'm lower, out there in Harlem's right nearby. And every summer I go out there, there'd be some guy out there with this table, and he's got his chestnuts, and he's doing the whole shell game thing. Everybody in it? Everybody know what the shell game is? He's got the little ball right with the shells, and he's over there hustling. He's trying to make $1. And at first he'll make, he's got you, and you're winning. Now you made yourself $20 out of $1, right? And then you keep playing. At some point, you're the chump, right? You wind up spending more money than what you thought, and you wind up losing. Because somewhere along the way, the sleight of hand, he moved the little ball out of all 3 of the chestnuts, and you didn't know it. Right? Because that's what they do. That's why you don't play. The point is, I remember that story because this is how I see the mitochondria and the cell of the mitochondria. So certain these chestnuts, yeah? I see these enzymes as chestnuts. And what they're doing is they're taking that ball and they're moving it around. That's what they're doing. They're stealing electrons from the carbon chain. And they're moving them around. They're shuttling them around. Therefore, we call them electron transport shuttlers. They're called NADH and FADH2. And they're going to shuttle electrons to the electron transport chain, which is a part of the mitochondria. And when they get those electrons, guys, they're gonna do something really special that only mitochondria can do. All right? We're going to talk about it. We'll see what we're talking about today. But that's how we generate energy. That's how the mitochondria generate energy. Well, at the end of that whole process of moving electrons around, they can't keep them forever. They have to give them to somebody. You understand? So what the mitochondria will do is they'll split this. So if you see here, they'll split it and they'll give electrons to suffice it. And in turn, they'll make a free radical and they'll ultimately make water. So you see the oxygen and I make water. So what's happening? In the mitochondria, we're taking diatomic oxygen, we're splitting it, and we're making water molecules for each of the oxygens that we split from it. Everybody see? That's what the mitochondria are doing. They're doing this constantly. So the amount of water we produce in our cells is a direct correlation to the amount of oxygen that we're feeding it, as long as we're burning glucose. So we burn glucose, we need oxygen. So diatomic oxygen, this is what's most important here. Diatomic oxygen, that's O2, is the last electron acceptor in the E transport chain. And that E transport chain is in mitochondria. Okay? That's in mitochondria. Let me erase compounds. Yeah, the blue erases just fine. See that? It's that damn red. So you see why we're still kind of stuck in this whole idea of atoms and molecules. Because I want to get you through this stuff. I finally want to get through it so we can continue with cell. Are there any questions so far, guys? Any issues? Any concerns? Yeah.
Is that accepted or
Acceptor. It's an electron acceptor. It's the last electron acceptor in the electron transport chain. So in other words, I got my chestnuts. They got the electrons. Fine. If I never get rid of the electron, then the chestnut's filled with electron, you can't take another electron. The oxygen comes, takes the electron away, then the electrons can continue to move from one chestnut to another, to another, to another. You got me? And that's what we're doing. We're stealing electrons, guys. The whole reason why we're doing this is because we're stealing electrons from the carbon chain. That's all we're doing. We're stealing electrons from the carbon chain. That's really what we're doing to generate energy, is stealing electrons from the carbon chain. And these series of reactions are referred to as oxidation reduction reactions. This is why sometimes it helps to have taken Chem 46 before you take this class, because the electrochemistry that you would see in a galvanic battery cell. Think about this, battery cells. What am I talking about? Where do we use batteries, guys? Cars, right? What happens when you connect the battery up to a car? You get electron flow, yeah? Same thing in the human body. Guys, everything that we try to create in the world is nothing more than mimicking what already has been created in us, believe it or not. Just guys have really thought about it hard and long to try and manifest it into something real from understanding the human body and how it works. Does everybody understand that? So electron flow through a car is the same as electron flow, sure enough, through this electron transport chain in the mitochondria. The difference is there's not a lot of energy because we're able to stabilize it and kind of gradually take the energy away from it. Gradually take the energy away from it. Not like when I was a kid and I put the bobby pin into the, right? And I got pushed back like 30 feet. And then I went to and I had the nice teased out fro with no pick, right? That's like direct current flow, 240. Right? That's no, that's not good. So I was lucky my heart didn't stop. That was my first touch with that, right? But this is what we're doing, guys. And I can, and believe me when I tell you that if you grab the live wire of a microphone, right, or the speakers, right, when they're on and connected, and you touch that, take it out of the computer and touch it and hold it in hand, you'll produce a humming noise that you can perceive through the speakers, right? Because that's the bioenergetic field that we produce because of the electrons we're stealing away from carbon chains and feeding them to the electron transport chain of mitochondria. That's this guy right here. Those electron transport chain proteins, guys, you know where they are? On the inner mitochondrial membrane. So when you look it up in your textbook, you'll see. Look at the inner mitochondrial membrane, you're going to see all these little fancy proteins on it. Sure enough, you're going to see this one, give electron to one, passes it to the other, passes it to the other, and waits for oxygen to come. Oxygen doesn't come, then the electrons build up, and you can't make no more energy. Does that make sense? I'll give you another more real example. So I taught high school chemistry for a couple years. And you always have a couple in the class. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Some real special people, right? And I mean special because they got problems learning, right?
What are you referring to here?
I'm talking about students who just do dumb stuff, right? They just do dumb stuff. So at lunchtime, I see my special students, right, doing dumb stuff, right? Sure enough, what do you think they're doing? They're choking each other out.
That's some real dumb stuff.
That's some really dumb stuff, right? Everybody agree? Guys, if I choke myself out, I'm providing more or less oxygen to my body. I'm cutting oxygen off to my brain. Does everyone agree? So I mean, if I'm cutting it off to my brain, then that means my brain is resetting. All right? That's like giving somebody an insulin spike. You give somebody a whole bunch of bullets of insulin and watch their glucose drop and they go into hypoglycemic shock. It's pretty much the same effect because the brain shuts down and has to reset. You just choke yourself out. It's like having a mini stroke. And I'm sitting there watching these guys choke each other out, and I'm wondering, what the hell are these guys doing? Like, of course, what was the first thing I said? You guys are just getting stupid about it. And they looked at me laughing, and I was like, yeah, I'm not joking. Like, do you not realize that every time you choke yourself out, you're cutting a part of your brain off from oxygen? And the moment you do that, if oxygen is the last electron acceptor, then for a moment in time, my mitochondria is not generating enough energy for my cells. And my cell could die. So you could wake up and forget your name, who you are. You could forget the last 5 years of your life. Does that make sense, guys? No, it doesn't. So you see why I call them special? It's for not using a more colorful phrase, right? Because that's just dumb, isn't it? It's just dumb. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about you. My brain's my brain costs a little too much to be cutting oxygen off to it. You know what I mean? It's been way too much time cultivating this brain to be cutting oxygen off to it, you know? I don't know. But anyway, last electron acceptor. Oxygen is the last electron acceptor in the electron transport chain. Water is the elixir of all life, guys. If we don't have oxygen, then we don't generate energy. You understand that? If we don't have water, then we don't have this perfect balance. We don't have that perfect balance. And sure enough, molecules. Let's talk about the molecules now. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. If I use carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, here. If I use carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, ready? I'm going to do this. I think I did this before for you guys. If I create this, long carbon chain, that's a fatty acid. Well, with fatty acids, I can make lipids. Well, that allows me to make my membrane, my plasma membrane, my nuclear membrane, my outer nuclear membrane, my inner nuclear membrane, my outer mitochondrial membrane, my inner mitochondrial membrane. Everybody follow? The vesicles, the Golgi. Everybody see that? These are centrioles, so those aren't organelles. Okay? And then, so you can see, and then I got these two here, lysosome and peroxisomes. Now, fancy terms for a lot of stuff. The fact is that, hey, plasma membrane is still made of lipids. You got me, guys? So this would be my fatty acid. If I take two fatty acids and I stick them to a small compound called glycerol plus a phosphate, I now have a phospholipid. That's in your textbook. It's drawn out there so you can see it. With a phospholipid, now I can aggregate the phospholipids to create a phospholipid bilayer. That'll allow me to make the outer nuclear membrane, the inner nuclear membrane. Remember, the outer nuclear membrane is consistent with the ER, right? And that ER can be smooth or rough depending if it's associated with ribosomes or not. The Golgi is separate, right? So thank God for these fatty acids. Yes? Does everyone agree? Thank God for these fatty acids. Something else. I think I talked about this, didn't I? Cholesterol. We need cholesterol. Yes? Do we need cholesterol? Yeah. We do. Good. There's good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, but what? You still need a certain amount of cholesterol in your body. If you, as a male, if you go below 7% body fat, you got issues. Because less than 7% body fat, then you don't have enough cholesterol to feed your system what it needs to make the hormones necessary for life itself. You're running at a very dangerous levels. In that case, if you are that lean, then you'd have to be physically consuming what you would need regularly to ensure that your levels are at the minimum. Otherwise, your body could start shutting down certain processes. Okay? And that has to be monitored by physicians who know what they're doing. So you got to be aware. Sometimes, if long term, patients can become more aware as to how their body responds when their percent body fat goes too low. They'll know to consume more fat in their diet. You can always just eat cholesterol, right? You can eat just some fat. Right? You can eat some fat. So it's not hard. But sometimes you'd be surprised how someone gets so in tune with their body that they'll know when those cholesterol levels will drop below a certain amount, and they'll know it. They'll know it because after a period of time, you learn how your body responds to things. You'll know, oh, my sugar levels are low. Oh, my amino acids are low. Oh, my, it was interesting. I was watching Naked and Afraid over the weekend. And it was really interesting because you had this guy who's he's trained, special forces, Navy SEAL, and he's out there with this girl who dives regularly, who's an avid diver. She fishes, so she's like, real gung ho with going in the water, not afraid of going in the water and looking for stuff to eat. This guy lost it because he was expending too much energy. And he didn't have enough amino acids, and he knew it. He knew his brain was going like a little haywire. And if it wasn't for her, who knew how to hunt for these small little sources of protein, that she actually kept him alive and kept him in the game, because they wouldn't have finished if it wasn't for him. So they actually finished together because they were able to work as a group. And he's the kind of guy that, I'm military. I don't need nobody. I can do this all on my own, kind of thing. And it was a wake up call for him because he had issues with even dealing with her. And then so it was just a really great example of how, people can become so in tune to when these metabolites or when these nutrients are low, that they'll know that their body is demanding of it and they can feed it. My aunt, who's a type 1 diabetic, she has been for years. She knows when her blood sugars are low. You'll know it. Right? You'll start this profuse sweating, and then you'll get like a euphoric state, and it's quite immediate. So you got to be really, really careful.
What about the instances when you stand up too quick and you see stars?
So that's normal, especially as we get older, because in most cases it's normal. In some cases, it could be indications of some form of pathological disease, the calcium deposits within the blood vessel. So, your whole cardiovascular system is responsible for providing that blood flow. And if the tube, instead of it being malleable and expanding back and forth, it becomes stiff and rigid, then you can't properly adjust, and that becomes part of the issue. Because up here you have a sensor. So when it senses that the pressure drops, it sends signals back that causes the blood vessels to constrict, and that's what raises the blood pressure up. So that's when you go from lying down to sitting up. Well, that response sometimes is slow to respond, especially as we get older, separately because the blood vessels get rigid instead of staying pliable. So this becomes less responsive. So the blood pressure drops and we don't respond the same. Right? And usually it's in the bathroom that this happens, because why? They're taking a shit. And when you take a shit, when you go to bear down, what happens? You get a blood pressure drop, and you go to stand up, right? You go to stand up, and all of a sudden your blood pressure drops even more, and you can't adjust as quickly. Or they're getting out of bed. It happened to my grandmother in Puerto Rico. She fell and she broke her hip. She's getting out of bed. Actually, I know she was on the shitter. She's getting out of the shitter, and she just whoop, fell right over. Luckily, my grandmother here, she's diabetic, but she hasn't happened to her yet. She has slipped and fallen, but she hasn't broken her hip. Because she's a diabetic.
That usually happens when I stretch. I don't know if that's...
It's normal if you get up too quickly. It's normal, but your body should respond almost immediately when you're young. If it's not responding immediately when you're young, then it's definitely an indicator of something going on there. Yeah.
The stretching can be if you're like cutting off a nerve, like if you're straining your neck or holding a position for too long.
Yeah, there are several ways. Like if you really intensely meditate, you could actually induce the same thing, because you could, true meditation, you get your blood pressure really, really low, and then if you get up really quick, too quick, you could just fall right out. So when you're in any position for a long period of time, this can happen because your body will adjust. So you got to give yourself time to kind of acclimate. Just like if you were to go up into the atmosphere, which, by the way, has a lot to do with what we're talking about now. So with oxygen, if you go up to a higher atmosphere, guys, right, it's less % oxygen in the air. So do you see why it's beneficial for people to go up to the Mile High City and practice and train? Because their bodies will adapt if they can adapt. If they can't adapt, then they got to come back down because they don't belong there. You never belong there. If you go there and you can't adapt, it means you don't belong there. Don't ever go there again. All right? Unless you go in there specifically to kind of improve, and then you're forcing yourself to adapt, right? And you got to do it under a doctor because you could seriously die from this stuff. It's called altitude sickness, and you can die from it. So.
From the stretching comment, there's some people that have their veins that are not made the right way.
Yeah.
So if you stretch the wrong way, you can just be pressing them together.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting that you mentioned that too. So in the eye, anytime you have a hypertensive crisis, so you have your vein and artery run right alongside each other. Anytime you have a hypertensive crisis, which means your blood pressure goes down, your artery does this, flips over onto the vein, and that's why people who have regular untreated hypertension will lose sight of their eyes because of the poor blood supply. Because again, our job is to get blood through and get it back. Our job is to get oxygen there and to take carbon dioxide away. Because cells are what? Burning. They're burning glucose in the presence of oxygen in the mitochondria, right? To produce carbon dioxide. The cell's going to produce carbon dioxide and water and 32 ATP. That's adenosine triphosphate. That's the energy for life. That's why we need glucose. That's why we need mitochondria. So wait. So red blood cells, how do they live? They don't. They live 90 to 120 days and then they're programmed to die because they have no mitochondria.
You said 90 to 1.
90 to 120 days. Every red blood cell in your body will be recycled and destroyed every 90 to 120 days from the moment you are conceived until the day you die. Every red blood cell has to come out of the bone marrow, has to lose all its stuff, and then its job is to just, hey, deliver oxygen. Hey, by the way, since you're here, why don't you go ahead and take this carbon dioxide I made up, take it back to lung, throw it out. But yeah, you know what? You only get to live 90 to 120 days, sorry. Because you can't make enough energy to survive. You have no mitochondria.
How's it destroyed?
What's that?
How's it destroyed?
Spleen.
Thank you.
Spleen. Spleen, guys, your spleen is responsible for recycling red blood cells. And sure enough, that comes in, oh, see, no red. I'm glad I caught myself. See how I caught myself? This guy right here. Iron. Iron is so important, guys. And it's important not so much in its +3 form, because you don't want it in +3 form.
Why not?
Because in +3 form, doesn't work the same. It's oxidized, and when it's oxidized, it changes color. And it can pick up oxygen-free radicals, and you don't want the Fe3 form. You want it in Fe +2 form. So how do I take a plus charge away? What does that mean, first of all? Let's look at iron. What does it mean when they say +3 charge, +2 charge? What do they mean by that? What do they mean when they say sodium is a +1 charge? What do they mean by that?
Extra neutrons?
No, it means that an electron was lost
And it gained.
and that there's a proton that's unopposed.
Okay.
So this goes back. When we look at atoms in the periodic table, only on the periodic table, yeah? The number of electrons will always equal the number of protons. Does everybody see that? So on the periodic table, always, protons and electrons will be